And speaking of knowledge, let's get counting. Number 10, Marvel's Lifeline. One of the best things about the Ultimate line was what it did for Marvel as a company and a publisher. It provided a lifeline to Marvel at a time when it needed it the most. The comics industry bubble that once had made collectibles so valuable had burst. The hype and demand of the early 90s had vanished completely, leaving Marvel with tons of comics printed that would simply not sell. With the demand gone and production costs putting them into the red, Marvel was forced to sell off licenses to some of their best characters. This is how Sony got the rights to Spider-Man and how Fox got the rights to X-Men. And it's what prompted Marvel to change things up and create the Ultimate Universe. The Ultimate Universe was meant to be something fresh and new, free of continuity and ultimately more gritty, realistic, and with an edge. Amazingly, the new line of Ultimate Comics did well. So well that it provided Marvel with the stability it needed to recover. Without the Ultimate line, it's possible that we might not have the Marvel stories, animated series, films, or comics of today. That's how successful and important Ultimates was. Number 9, the Inhumans. I've said it before and I will say it again, I think the design of the Inhumans is much better on Earth 1610. They look more compelling and intimidating. Nothing against the 616 Inhumans, who I also like just fine, but I actually want to get to know these Inhumans more. Overall, I think the Ultimate Inhumans are a little more interesting than their main continuity counterparts. Number 8, no previous continuity. One of the best things that the Ultimate Universe and line offered readers was a fresh start, meaning that years and years of comic book history didn't really apply here. The idea was you didn't have to know what had gone on in the past or what was going on currently in the comics to just jump into a book, with comic book continuity being a concept that many new readers still find daunting today. This was freeing for consumers because it meant you could buy in without having to worry about potentially being confused because something from 20 years prior came up that you needed to understand in order to know what was really going on in the story. This wasn't the case for Earth 1610. At least, it wasn't the case to begin with. Freedom from continuity meant more creative freedom for writers, but unfortunately, Ultimates really only started as new reader accessible, but quickly became bogged down with intricate storytelling and details. It even ended up having retcons as well, which might confuse readers jumping in later on, with the first Ultimate Iron Man series being so out there that Marvel decided to retcon it out of existence, instead turning it into a ridiculous anime show set in the same universe, but that wasn't actually considered to be the true story of Iron Man. So that comic basically became like non-canon. Number 7, Sue and Reed splits. Finally, this reality is one where Sue seems to be more aware that Reed can never really fully commit to her. He proposes right before Ultimatum goes down and they are faced with a giant wave as a result. Sue manages to push the wave back but slips into a comatose state as a result, prompting Reed to go out looking to punish the villains and abandoning Sue, leaving her with the Thing, aka Ben Grimm. In the Ultimate Universe, Reed and Sue actually don't end up together in the end. In fact, Sue, after she's revived, finds out about a sinister plot of Reed's, realizing that he has become a villain. Ben attempts to try and explain how Reed could just be up to something that they both don't fully understand, but Sue is over making any more excuses for him, implying that she never wanted to marry him to begin with. In fact, Sue and Ben actually end up together, with Reed becoming a villain. For some reason, I actually find this to be just a better fit for these two characters, just in terms of their overall paths. As much as they've had some pretty sweet moments together on Earth 616, the couple has also had major problems over the years that sometimes seem just to get swept under the rug so that we can try to keep them together without any resolution of those problems. This, however, provides us with some resolution and consequence for those moments, and it kind of addresses some of them, which I like. Just feels a little more realistic. Number 6, Nick Fury. Another great thing that the Ultimate Universe gave us was a new Nick Fury that was so successful he actually became the new version of Nick Fury in the main continuity, and inspired the MCU version of the character as well. Hilariously enough, Samuel L. Jackson's likeness inspired the redesign of the character. Fury would even acknowledge that Jackson would be his top pick to play him in a movie. The story goes that originally Samuel L. Jackson was actually not too happy about Marvel using his likeness without really asking him or without any compensation or conversation about it, but when he contacted them, they actually apologized and offered him the role of Nick Fury in any future films. Jackson supposedly was appeased and accepted the offer, and the rest, they say, is history. Today, I personally cannot imagine the MCU without him. Number 5, Death. Wait a minute, Amanda, didn't you just cite death as being a bad thing on your worst list? Yes, I did. We were talking about Ultimatum. But that was more death for the sake of death, not death in general. I actually enjoy when characters die. Well, I don't enjoy when they die, but more that I enjoy the finality that death invites. I like death as consequences, but more than that, I like the higher stakes that it gives us. If anyone at any point can die, it means that everything is more exciting because, you know, they might not make it back from that mission. Their actions carry more weight because there's a real risk that they face. When characters can die, it also means stories get to end, and with endings come new and exciting beginnings. Number 4, The Maker. Talk about unique spins on characters. The Maker definitely offered us a completely different take on Reed Richards, one that was more modern and actually felt like it kind of fit better, not just within the world, but within a more current day and age. I think a huge issue with the Fantastic Four that we see when it comes to adapting that team to sort of a film setting in the modern day is that the heroes are kind of stiff. They're definitely a product of the time period in which they were created, a perfect and kind of wholesome family unit. The Ultimate Universe shattered that expectation, broke up the Fantastic Four team, and gave us the amazing villain that is the Maker, a version of Reed Richards whose love and dedication to science actually makes him a horrifying, immoral, pretty much mad scientist type, if a mad scientist could somehow also be like disturbingly sane and logical. The Maker is one of the best villains to have ever existed in comics in general, not even just within the confines of the Ultimate Universe, which of course the Maker would also literally break free from in the comics. Number 3, Ultimate Spider-Man. Although there were many problems when it came to the continuity of the Ultimate Universe, the Spider-Man series was not one of them. In fact, Ultimate Spider-Man was more celebrated for being a breath of fresh air that remained consistently coherent throughout. To this day, it remains some fans' favorite Spider-Man comic series, period, and not just one of their favorite series within the Ultimate Universe. Some even hold this series above any of the Spider-Man main continuity stuff. Why was the Spider-Man series so good from Ultimates? It had a sense of finality, and it wasn't wishy-washy. It committed, it followed through, it offered fresh new takes on characters, and whether or not you loved all of those new takes, you had to respect them. Most of those changes were made to make Spider-Man's stories and characters feel more grounded, more realistic. Peter also returned to high school, which a lot of fans enjoyed because they felt it was younger Peter, Spider-Man in high school, that was kind of his most relatable version. So taking him back there felt really good. Number 2, Miles Morales. One of the greatest things to come out of Ultimate Spider-Man as well, the story and character of Miles Morales, whom we've all come to love very dearly. What's more, Peter's apparent death also paved the way for Miles, allowing him to step into the spotlight as Spider-Man, and even take over. Even after we learned that Peter Parker had actually survived as well and wasn't actually dead due to the Oz formula making him virtually immortal, he still decided to pass the torch to Miles. He'd had his time as a hero, now it was Miles' turn. I just love how the story goes. I love that Miles truly got to be the one and only Spider-Man on Earth 1610. And while I love Peter, I kind of hope we get to see Miles step into the spotlight as the one and only Spider-Man at some point on Earth 616 too. Or bring back a world where he is the one and only Spider-Man. Number 1, the MCU. The Ultimate line is what helped to pave the way for the MCU, and in fact provided much needed inspiration for the cinematic universe. There are many characters from Earth 1610 who have influenced their Earth 1999 counterparts. That is, their Marvel Cinematic Universe counterparts. Not only have characters from the Ultimate Universe found their way to the big screen through the MCU, but stories from the Ultimate line have also served to inspire some of those told to us in the films. Number 10, She-Hulk. In Ultimates, Jennifer Walters is not She-Hulk, Betty Ross is. She ended up stealing the formula that would cause her transformation from Walters, who here is a doctor and scientist instead. Betty needed the formula to try and save Bruce Banner, the Hulk, who Nick Fury had sent Wolverine to assassinate. Betty had tried everything else she could think of to interfere with Fury's plans, and this was the only option really left to her. Stealing the formula, she was pursued, but injected it in time, becoming the Jade Giantess She-Hulk. The serum made it so that rage was not a part of the transformation, meaning that Betty got to keep her wits and maintain a sense of level-headedness while transformed. She would end up pursuing the Hulk and reconnect with him, but the two would ultimately end up fighting one another. Afterwards, She-Hulk found herself defeated by Wolverine and was later taken in by S.H.I.E.L.D., only apprehended likely because Wolverine made her wear a collar that basically prevented her from transforming. Number 9. Miles Morales. One of my favorite characters to come from 1610, we have Spider-Man, aka Miles Morales. Miles was so powerful in terms of his popularity that he was one of the few characters to survive the destruction of Earth 1610. He ended up moving over to Earth 616, given a place there once the world was reconstructed by Molecule Man and Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four. Molecule Man actually ended up saving Miles because he ended up giving him a burger when he was hungry. Gotta love those pocket burgers. In a way, it's always been Miles' quirkiness and kindness that has remained one of his greatest strengths. But aside from that, he's also one of the most powerful Spider-Men, or spider-folk, around. He not only has the proportional strength of a spider, making him super strong, but can also camouflage his body to match his surroundings, rendering him pretty much invisible to the untrained eye, and comes with his Venom Blast, which allows him to deal devastating electrical shocks to his opponents. Now, every time I say Venom Blast, I just think of the Jessica Drew Spider-Woman cartoon from the 70s. Oh my goodness, Venom Blast. Number 8. Invisible Woman. Sue would end up in the ultimate reality married to Ben Grimm, but initially would fall for Reed, just like in the Earth 616 reality. She would also stay loyal to him for quite some time, despite the fact that, like on Earth 616, he tended to become obsessed with science to the point of, well, kind of ignoring her. Sue herself was also a genius and ended up with 4 doctorates in biochemical science before she entered her 20s. She possesses an IQ of 170, not far off from Tony Stark in this reality. Her powers allow her to turn invisible, generate force fields and shields. She can use these shields to protect defensively or to destroy and attack offensively. Many times, Sue has used her abilities to save her teammates' lives. Number 7. Black Bolt. Black Bolt in the Ultimate Universe has power that is expected to be at the same level as his Earth 616 counterpart, which would mean that, well, he's pretty strong. While Black Bolt is super powerful, I mostly put him on this list because, well, I like his costume better in the Ultimate Universe, and I wanted to talk about that. I know that doesn't make him more powerful having a cooler outfit, but he still is likely one of the most powerful heroes in all of the Ultimate Universe, just like he is one of the most powerful in the main continuity besides. But also, that costume though. Honestly, overall, I think many of the Inhumans look way more intimidating and interesting in the Ultimate Universe. And sure, to some the Inhumans might not seem like heroes in this universe because they don't really fight for humanity, but their own heroes and King Black Bolt do fight for them as a people. So to his own people, to the Inhumans, Black Bolt is definitely still a hero. Number 6. Wolverine. Wolverine is similar to his Earth 616 counterpart, but with a bit of a different history and family life. He actually has a son in this reality who's very different from his other children from Earth 616, who we're used to seeing. Jimmy Hudson is Wolverine's son, and we later learned that he was raised by a pal of Logan's who he'd made during his service in Iraq. James Hudson took in the child and changed his name legally from Howlett to Hudson. Jimmy grew up not knowing about his true parents and his true origins until he got into a car accident which caused his mutant powers to manifest. He also has a healing factor and claws like his dad. In the Ultimate Universe, Wolverine's healing abilities are thought of as being so intense that many believe that his mutant power may not actually be healing, but instead are survival and adaptability based, which tells you just how OP those powers can be at times. Number 5. President Captain America. Not only was Captain America a hero in the Ultimate Universe, but he was also the President of the United States for a time. So he had political powers as well as superpowers. Pretty impressive. Steve's story is a little different here. Instead of Bucky going MIA, he survived while Steve was lost for a time, frozen in ice. Bucky and Steve's fiance bonded over his loss, which only brought them closer together, and they ended up happily married. When Steve returned, it was later revealed that his fiance had his child while he was gone, who had grown up to become the Red Skull. Gasp. Steve's powers are similar to his main continuity counterpart. He is a super soldier and as such has superhuman speed, strength, durability, reflexes, and has somewhat enhanced healing as well as dramatically slowed aging. Just like on Earth 616, he is also known for being a skilled and gifted leader and brilliant tactician. Number 4. Kitty Pryde. In the Ultimate Universe, Kitty Pryde would end up as the leader of the mutants of Utopia. In this reality, she still has her powers to walk on air and water and never needed to hold her breath in order to phase. On her first mission out with the X-Men, Kitty snuck aboard their jet. In fact, her mother had made Professor Xavier promise not to allow her daughter to get involved with any X-Men missions or any Danger Room training. On this mission that she was not supposed to be on, Kitty was the one to save the day when Wolverine and Cyclops were about to be attacked by a supercomputer. Kitty phased through the computer, rendering it useless. Here, Kitty took up the codenames Shadowcat and later on Shroud. I love the codename Shroud for her, and would even go on to fight Galactus and win! You know you're powerful if you can fight Galactus and survive that. Number 3, Thor. In this reality, we first weren't sure if Thor was actually Thor or just a man suffering from severe delusions. Thorleif Goleman, it turned out, was simply the name that Thor had been given on Midgard when he was banished after the death of his father and the fall of Asgard. In the end, Thor would remember who he was and would take a suit and hammer that were made to reflect his traditional Norse god power set, promising to use the suit and its abilities to protect Midgard. Thor would help to defeat the Hulk and, in his fight against the X-Men, best Storm as well. Eventually, he would get his own powers back, but either with his suit powers or his natural powers, he's pretty intimidating. He would also end up joining the Ultimates and befriending Captain America and Iron Man. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to visit some more alternate universes or just go back more to the Ultimates, let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 2, Iron Man. Iron Man has a bit of a twist to his origin in the Ultimate Universe. He was actually born as a twin to the Starks and has a twin brother named Gregory. Tony exhibited a brilliant mind and intellect from a young age, and his father, Howard, hoped that he would one day take over the company. But initially, Tony was kind of resistant, preferring to create his own company instead, which he built from the ground up with his then girlfriend, Josie Gardner. Eventually, though, his dad would persuade him to join the family business, prompting him and Josie to split after he left their company. Later on, he'd get lost in his own work after Josie died during a plane crash, which it turns out was the work of Mandarin International, an enemy of Stark Industries. Oh no. Tony is even more powerful in this reality, having his brain affected by exposure to radiation from an infinity gem. This granted him the ability to communicate and control technology with his mind. He can kind of do that in 616, I think, but I don't know if it's to this extent. Number 1, Captain Marvel. Yep, in the reality of the Ultimates, Rick Jones is one of the most powerful heroes around. I know, it sounds crazy, but this is because here he isn't just a friend to many heroes and like BFF of the Hulk. Instead, he is a hero in his own right. He was granted powers by the Watcher, given powers strong enough to enable him to save the planet. He would go on to take up the alias Nova and eventually Captain Marvel, but he's also been referred to before as the Sentry, just to give you an idea of what level of power we're dealing with here. He can emit energy blasts strong enough to harm Galactus, even after he combined with Galactus. And he can teleport across the universe or galaxies, or simply teleport others such a great distance if he wishes. He can also teleport to other dimensions and possesses cosmic awareness, which can be focused or guided by the Watcher. Number 10, Hawkeye. Clint Barton might often be thought of as a man who just runs around with a bow and some arrows, but the Ultimate Universe took his character to a whole new level. Hawkeye became more grounded in reality with a masterful archer who can shoot off 6 arrows faster than a human can fire 6 bullets. In this reality, he was also given enhanced vision, which allows him to see at an increased distance and granted him a better sense of contrast, as it's believed he sees more in black and white than in color. He was even implied to be able to see so well that he can use his eyes to tell him what is true and what is not. Pretty insane. Number 9, the real Black Panther. And if you're wondering why I'm saying the real one, because there was a time when Captain America was Black Panther in Ultimates, but that's a story for another time. Black Panther has a really different and kind of weird story in Ultimates. He actually ends up getting a similar treatment to Wolverine in this universe, joining the Weapon X program. Here, T'Challa is given Weapon X claws and has his general strength, speed, and stamina increased even further by the Weapon X program. In Ultimates, he also possesses a regenerative healing factor, and he is believed to be a mutant in terms of origins. Black Panther was given his codename by Weapon X, who gave him the name after helping to save his life after he fought a Black Panther in Wakanda to prove himself a viable leader as the second-born son of King T'Chaka. Yeah, in this reality, T'Challa is the second-born son. and actually M'Baku is his older brother. Number 8. Doctor Strange. In theory, Doctor Strange's son, Stephen Strange Jr., also known as Doctor Strange, should likely not have died in the way that he did, considering how powerful he is. Although not as talented as his father, Strange was still a skilled magic user. It is implied, based on the artifacts that he holds and his place in the Sanctum Sanctorium, that despite his youth and his inexperience, he may have still held the title of Sorcerer Supreme in the reality of 1610, which should mean he's pretty powerful. Though of course, this is never really confirmed, so. Strange manages to defeat Nightmare when he possesses Spider-Man, teams up with Ultimate Knights in a fight against Kingpin, but ultimately is defeated and brutally killed by Dormammu, who strangles him with his own cloak and constricts him until his head explodes. It's pretty violent and pretty dark. Despite his gruesome death, Strange was still considered to be a powerful magic user and also possessed telepathic abilities besides. While he went by the name of Doctor Strange, he himself was not a licensed or practicing medical doctor. He was the son of Doctor Strange and Clea. Number 7. Carnage, aka Gwen Stacy, or really more specifically Gwen Stacy's clone, I should say. Gwen ended up being killed by Carnage, and during that process was in a way also kind of reborn through the symbiote. You can tell the OG version of Gwen Stacy from the Ultimates apart from the later appearing clone from the line by looking at the color of her eyes. Gwen originally had hazel eyes in this universe, but her cloned version, who was also for a time Carnage, had blue eyes. Although in her Carnage form, her eyes became white, of course. Well, you might not think of Carnage as a hero here due to its history on Earth 616 and its origins as a symbiote here, as well as its attachment to Gwen. It was kind of a mash between a heroic and villainous entity, so it wasn't really a villain here. During her time as Carnage, Gwen possessed powers similar to Peter Parker's Spider-Man. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are enjoying this list and you want more Ultimates lists, please let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also, thank you. It really helps us out when you do that, so thanks. Number 6, Peter Parker. Sure, he died, but he was still pretty strong regardless, and he only died twice. Also, don't get me wrong, I do not wish for the death of Peter, but in general, I'm just kind of glad that death itself was a thing in the Ultimate Universe. It meant actions and stories had, you know, actual consequences. I mean, sort of. Peter kinda died twice, and he didn't stay dead. The more memorable death to me is the one where he died in a brutal fight against the Sinister Six, working to protect those he loved, while also watching as they did their part to protect him as well. Oh my goodness! It was actually a really beautiful conclusion for the hero, with him finally accepting that while he couldn't save his Uncle Ben, at least he could save the other people in his life whom he loved. It was like a really heartbreaking moment. But then of course later on Peter was resurrected, which I guess for the purpose of this list makes him even more powerful as Spider-Man because he came back from the dead. But it also kind of ruined the whole story of his death for me, so Number 5, Nick Fury. Fury ranks so high on this list because, well, he's kind of in charge of many different superpowered characters and knows what buttons to push to get them to do his bidding and make them work for him. Fury was the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the Ultimate Universe and was also exposed to the Super Soldier Serum as well, which gave him enhanced strength, durability, speed, and enhanced healing on the same level as Captain America. His healing factor, of course, was not strong enough to regenerate his eye, which remained gone pretty much forever. Even without insane superpowers, this version of Fury is not someone you'd want to mess with, as he also has some of the most powerful tech at his disposal, which can do things like allow him to walk on air and turn invisible. Number 4, The Thing. In this reality, The Thing and Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, end up together, with Susan leaving Reed Richards to be with Ben. Ben Grimm was mutated after exposure to the End Zone, turning into a rock-like monster creature. However, later on in the Earth 1610 universe, he would gain the ability to actually change form at will after experiencing a secondary mutation, which also gave him his purple form. As such, he can switch between human form and rock form. While in his rock form, Ben is super strong. As a result of his mutation, he also had enhanced durability and endurance. He can withstand extremely hot and extremely cold temperatures as well for a short amount of time. Ben is actually considered to be so strong and massive in his rock form that he has to wear a containment suit. Otherwise, each step that he takes would actually cause destruction within his nearby vicinity. That is just how powerful he is. Number 3, the Hulk. While the Thing has beat the Hulk in the Ultimate Universe before, I still think he's a little more powerful, though not nearly as powerful as his Earth 616 counterpart. I feel like one of the things that we also need to consider about Ultimate Hulk is how many times he's been boosted up in the Ultimate Universe. One of his weaknesses is adamantium, which is strong enough when sharpened or enough force is applied to pierce the Hulk's thick skin. But if Hulk gets angry enough, even this won't work on him. And he also at one point to himself is bonded with adamantium, so Hulk also received a power boost from Galactus, and at one point wielded an incomplete set of the Ultimate Infinity Gauntlets, giving him another power boost. Hulk was initially a member of the Ultimates, but would later on end up serving on the Maker's Dark Ultimates team. Number 2, Hercules. Hercules of Earth 1610 was recruited by Nick Fury to join his Howling Commandos, who he sent to battle the Maker and the Dark Ultimates. Hercules is believed to have godlike powers, granting him superhuman deity-level strength. It's still believed, however, that he could be weaker than his Earth 616 counterpart, but I personally am not so sure about that fact. Hercules here squared off with Ultimate Hulk while his power levels were boosted by Galactus and managed to defeat him solo. Hercules is also considered to be a skilled fighter and is the son of Zeus. Number 1, Blue Marvel. I love when cosmic heroes just end up at the top of a list. Cosmic stuff, I love it. Blue Marvel is one such hero today. Blue Marvel is Adam Brashear, and I know what you might be thinking. Hold up. This Blue Marvel is not from Earth 1610, Amanda. He is not from the Ultimates. And yes, he is not from the Ultimates, but he is one of the Ultimates of Earth 616. You see what I did there? You see what I did? And he ended up facing off with Marvel's 1610 Ultimates, so I figured that while he is from Earth 616, he should still kind of count, because he's on the Ultimates. I also just really like Blue Marvel, and I enjoyed watching him one-punch Earth 1610's Hulk, which I thought was pretty crazy, so I'm putting him on the list. In the fight against the 1610 Ultimates, Blue Marvel and Hulk face off, and Blue Marvel makes quick work of the Hulk, knocking him out with one single punch. I just love these few panels, I just love it. Number 10, Charles Xavier. Professor X did die in this reality, but before that, he was a gifted telepath. The manifestation of his powers in the Ultimates reality is actually believed to have caused his hair loss. That's right, his powers are so powerful, they caused him to go bald. I love it. Charles became good friends with Eric in this reality, and the two would band together as partners to create the Brotherhood of Mutants. However, the two split ways after Magneto started to see humans as inferior to mutants, believing that mutant kind should actually rule the world. And in case you didn't know, that's what leads to Professor X's death. Number 9, Captain Britain. Captain Britain was the brother of the original one to hold that mantle, Brian Braddock. James Braddock Jr., Brian's brother, took up the mantle of Captain Britain after his brother ended up in a coma. He is considered to be slightly stronger than the original and would go on to try and help Thor fight against the Children of Tomorrow. Captain Britain was one of the few to survive that battle. He'd also end up later on serving on the Ultimates team. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we explore alternate realities, be sure to show us by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Daredevil. Matt has a story that is similar to his origins in 616, but is also unique in how much more personal his connections are to, well, pretty much everyone around him, and how much enemies and allies influenced his choices to become a hero and defined what being a hero means to him. Matt Murdock, like his 616 counterpart, was also blinded at a young age, but found his other senses enhanced. His father also died after refusing to cooperate in a fixed boxing match. However, in this reality, Kingpin was directly responsible for his father's murder. Like in the reality of 616, Daredevil's experience, training, and enhanced senses make him a gifted fighter. Number 7, Spider-Woman. In this reality, Jessica Drew has a completely different backstory. She is actually the clone of Peter Parker, made to be an exact copy of him, but female. As such, she has all of his memories. Initially, she was intended to be used as a government weapon, repurposed and trained as an agent, but she and the other Spider clones they made escaped. Jessica would go on to keep her memories, but separate herself from them and Peter, taking her own name and carving out her own life for herself, though still acting as a hero. At one point in time, she was a member of the Ultimates, much like how Jessica Drew of Earth 616 is a well-known member of the Avengers. Number 6, the Wasp. When it comes to Janet Van Dyne, you might just think of her untimely and gruesome end in Ultimates, eaten by the Blob as she was, but there is a lot more to her character than just that very graphic death. Janet was also for a time the leader of the Ultimates after they decided to split off from S.H.I.E.L.D. She was chosen as leader because she was considered one of the most experienced members. Many underestimated her because her abilities were about her shrinking as opposed to growing to ginormous sizes, which made enemies consider her weak and insignificant, but she would prove to them just how powerful she was. Her untimely end did not really seem deserved, and fortunately it was undone when the Maker resurrected the alternate world over 1610. Number 5. Cyclops. If you thought Magneto was OP in this universe, Cyclops was technically the one to put an end to him. Here, Scott Summers was the one responsible for using his optic blast to completely destroy Magneto after he himself had killed billions, including the person who had brought the X-Men together, Professor X. Cyclops in the comics was also for a time a member of Magneto's Brotherhood. In this reality, Magneto even considered him as a potential heir when it came to a leadership role. However, Scott would eventually betray Magneto after he learned of his plans to attack and destroy Washington, D.C. using reprogrammed Sentinels. Number 4. Jimmy Hudson. In the Ultimate reality, Jimmy Hudson is the son of Wolverine and Magneto's wife, Magda. Jimmy would only learn upon his powers first manifesting that Wolverine was his dad. In a message left for him, Wolverine would specifically stress that Jimmy not really focus on who his real mother was or on his past, but continue to move forward and to respect the Hudsons as his parents who had taken him in and raised him on Wolverine's behalf. His powers are similar to Wolverine. He has a regenerative healing factor and bone claws. Jimmy can also coat his claws at will with a metallic substance. Jimmy has bonded with one of the symbiotic aliens known as the Poisons, but seems to maintain control of himself even while bonded with the Poison. So he's basically got like a little symbiote alien pal, but not a symbiote like how Venom's a symbiote, not from Clinter. Number 3. Machine Man. Danny Ketch was originally a spy and operative that was recruited to be a part of Nick Fury's Howling Commandos after the dissolution of the Ultimates. He would end up facing the global threat of the Galactus Swarm and MODOK in the Maker's City of Tomorrow. Danny would sacrifice himself to merge with the Swarm in order to free the captives of the city. Once merged, he then also prevented MODOK from escaping and blew up the city in order to defeat the enemy. It turned out, however, that Danny had survived with his consciousness being transferred to nanite technology that reappeared following this explosion. Aided by Agent Phil Coulson, the nanites were used to recreate a version of Danny Ketch, who was then dubbed the Machine Man. Number 2. Storm. Storm was invited to join the X-Men team by Jean Grey, who managed to save her from the police who were attempting to apprehend her because she had stolen a car. Initially, Storm had attempted to ditch Jean, thinking that she was working for Magneto, but when she learned of Professor X and his more noble mutant cause, she agreed to join. Her powers were more unpredictable and hard for Storm to control initially, with her not necessarily being established as one who had been worshipped as a goddess. However, over time training alongside the X-Men with Professor X, she would become a formidable fighter, hero, and X-Men member. Also, pretty much in every reality, Storm is just super OP. Number 1. Jean Grey. Just like in the main continuity of Earth 616, Jean is considered one of the most powerful characters around. Here, however, at least she has some pretty big problems to wrestle with on top of all of her power. When her powers first manifested, others thought that she was insane, which meant that Professor X ended up meeting with her and recruiting her from a mental institution. Initially, Jean also wasn't even sure if the Phoenix Force was real or not. Was it some intergalactic god, some manifestation of her own powers which were growing and expanding, or a demon seeking to destroy the planet? Her mental health has always been the counterpoint to her power, as Jean questions her own sanity in the Ultimate Universe, and yet she still wields godlike power. A deadly combination, but of course, Jean does her best to wield it wisely. Number 10. KRAVEN the Hunter. KRAVEN on Earth 1610 is actually the star of a show, following him as he hunts down dangerous and exotic animals. He planned on hunting Spider-Man to improve his show's ratings, but was exposed as a fraud when Spider-Man handily defeated him with one punch. Obsessed with getting revenge on Spider-Man for costing him his reputation, his job, and apparently his wife, KRAVEN experimented on himself, transforming himself into a lion-like monster. Eventually, he would go on to join the Sinister Six and continue to try to fight and kill Spider-Man. KRAVEN is a skilled tracker, and after his experimentation had superhuman levels of strength, speed, and endurance, becoming a much more fearsome opponent. Much more fearsome. Number 9. Prowler. Prowler is an interesting villain because when Miles Morales was moved over to Earth 616 after the destruction of Earth 1610 and the amalgamation of the Marvel Universe into Battleworld, Aaron Davis, Miles' uncle, also survived. Aaron Davis used to be partners in crime with Miles' father, his brother, Jefferson. But after the birth of his son, Jefferson decided to go on the straight and narrow, while Aaron continued on with his criminal activities. Initially, Aaron died in Earth 1610 after attempting to blackmail and then kill his nephew, knowing of his true identity as Spider-Man. However, he also found himself returned to life when Miles was moved over to Earth 616. He woke up in bed as though his death had never happened. He would end up becoming a criminal again, recruiting the Sinister Six and fighting against his nephew once more. His antagonism would actually inspire the formation of the Champions. Eventually, though, Aaron would attempt to also give up his criminal ways, being convinced by his nephew that he could do better. And friends, if you love villains as much as I love villains, please show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. Seriously, when you hit that thumbs up or when you click the subscribe, it really does help us out, so thank you for doing it. Number 8, Black Widow. Black Widow was almost one of the most successful villains around. She played the role of hero so well, no one saw her betrayal coming, not even her fiancé Tony Stark. Yep, in this world, Iron Man and Black Widow end up romantically together. However, it's later revealed that this was all part of Black Widow's plan to betray the Avengers and steal Stark's fortune. Mwahaha. Instead of redeeming herself and becoming a hero, Black Widow here remains a villain through and through, and is just pretending to be a hero. She even kills Jarvis! Oh no! But in the end, Stark is able to use the nanotech in her blood, which allows her to control the suit that he made for her as a wedding gift to neutralize Black Widow. Though not in time to save Jarvis, sadly. Black Widow would get hers in the end when Hawkeye found out where she was being kept and killed her as revenge for her orchestrating the death of his family and his own capture and torture. Yeah, Black Widow is really bad in the Ultimate Universe. Number 7, Colonel. The Colonel was Abdul Al-Rahman. He was a super soldier just like Captain America and was actually a hero to his own nation. He was part of the Liberators, the same group of villains that Black Widow was allied with. Abdul's powers were comparable to Captain America, as he was also a super soldier. In fact, believed to be the first successful super soldier since the creation of Cap. The Liberators were considered a group of villains by the Ultimates and the USA, but were in reality a multinational group of superpowered beings who banded together in their hopes to even the playing field for the rest of the world by destroying the Ultimates. The depiction of these villains was extremely political, problematic, and even at times racist. But if you consider his motivations and his backstory, Abdul was actually a pretty cool character. To add likely to his evil but badass appearance, he also fought with what appeared to be a double-bladed, well, a lightsaber. Energy blades, I think they're called, that looked very similar to Darth Maul's. Because, you know, Darth Maul's a bad guy, so how do we make Abdul look like a bad guy? Give him the same thing that Darth Maul fights with. What is happening? It's the Star Wars Marvel superhero crossover that none of us necessarily asked for, but there you go. Number 6, Gregory Stark. Gregory Stark is the twin brother of Tony Stark. He has less morals than his brother and is a more focused intellectual. Whereas Tony is known for his lavish playboy lifestyle, Gregory is not. In fact, that is one of the many things that Gregory always hated about his brother. He is the older twin, being born 20 minutes before Tony, and is not only more amoral, but is also more intelligent than his brother. Initially, he worked for S.H.I.E.L.D., but this was all part of a carefully planned world domination plot involving in part the overthrowing of S.H.I.E.L.D. superiors, leading eventually to Gregory being put in charge as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Eventually, the Ultimates would learn of his plot and turn on him, defeating and killing him after the nanites in his bloodstream were disabled by his own brother, Tony. Number 5, Modi Thorson. Modi is the son of Thor and Hela. Don't worry, in Ultimates they're not related. Not brother and sister, nor uncle and niece. Still, it's kind of icky to imagine, but Thor was forced to sleep with Hela in order to give her a child, so that in exchange she would return him to Earth so that he could be with Valkyrie. Of course, this didn't end up working out exactly as Thor had planned, because Valkyrie ended up dying and then Thor ended up coming back, so they didn't really get to be together, but hey, good try. When Modi was a child, Thor locked him away for his own protection, but gave him Mjolnir so that he'd be able to escape when he was worthy. After escaping the room he was locked up in, now fully grown, Modi ended up using the Mind Gem to bend others to his will. His plan was to destroy the US and basically rebuild Asgard out of its charred remains, because at this point in time Asgard had fallen, there was no Asgard. Modi even managed to bend his father to his will, but was not successful in controlling the mind of Captain America. In the end, Thor broke free of his son's will and killed him. Number 4. Green Goblin. Of course, Norman Osborn needs to be near the top on this list because, well, he's Norman Osborn. But in the reality of Earth 1610, he's actually even more fearsome than his 616 counterpart. Norman got his powers after learning of the creation of Spider-Man through an Oz formula infected spider. Believing that it was the combination of the Oz formula and spider DNA that granted those spider-like abilities, Norman theorized that combining the Oz formula with his own DNA should just transform him into a more superior version of himself. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out how he planned, and instead, Norman found himself transformed into a demon-like version of himself. This version of Norman comes with super strength, speed, durability, and is virtually indestructible and immortal, in a way that's similar to the Hulk. Every time he dies, Osborn claims he is resurrected. Osborn would also eventually make his way to the universe of Earth 616. But how did he get there? Number 3. Ultimatum. Ultimatum is like the evil version of Miles Morales, but is actually the main continuity version of that character. While he isn't originally from Earth 1610, instead hailing from the Prime universe of Earth 616, Miles Morales did spend a good amount of time living on Earth 1610. And I mean, his current villain name is Ultimatum, so I feel like he kind of earned a place on our list. Miles was the one responsible for bringing the 1610 version of Norman Osborn to Earth 616, who works for him as his lackey, hence why Ultimatum is higher up on this list. Ultimatum himself doesn't have any superpowers, but does have quite a bit of influence, being an ally of Earth 616's Kingpin originally, and also possesses knowledge of the multiverse. I keep pointing to my head for knowledge. It's just like, yes, Amanda, we know this is where your brain is. We know. Ultimatum also has a pretty sweet suit. Like a supervillain suit, not like a tailored suit. His plan was to take over Brooklyn, make it his own criminal empire, and send the Miles Morales of Earth 1610, Spider-Man, and his family back to their home reality. Fortunately, his plan fell apart in issue 19 of Miles Morales Spider-Man, when he found out he was unable to capture Spider-Man's parents. They're not easy to capture, so I love that he was like, this will work fine. But Jefferson was like, no, get out of here. What are you trying to do? Get out of here. Number 2, Magneto. Speaking of Ultimatum. Okay, so while Green Goblin is mortal and Ultimatum is the boss of Green Goblin, and Magneto is, not necessarily immortal, definitely not immortal, he still has proven to be very deadly in the Ultimate Universe, and it is for that reason that he gets ranked so high up. Just the numbers of lives he took is shocking during, of course, Ultimatum. Magneto killed Professor Xavier and other notable mutant heroes who stood in his way. He killed millions of people worldwide before S.H.I.E.L.D. and the X-Men were able to finally track him down and put a stop to it. Magneto then learned that his beliefs about mutant kind were wrong, and that mutants were created from the hereditary genes passed on from the super soldier serum. They weren't like divine in any way. This broke Magneto, destroying everything he had built his cause around, making him question everything he had done, as he should. In the end, Cyclops killed Magneto, vaporizing him with a powerful optic blast. See? Not immortal. Number 1, the Maker. Likely one of the most powerful and brilliant villains to come out of the Ultimate Universe. Jonathan Hickman, if you're watching this, you know what I'm talking about. The Maker is also a fan favorite among comic book writers and readers, so it's easy to understand how he ends up accomplishing so much and becoming so gifted. When we like a character, we want them to do well. When we like a villain, we want them to do bad. Do bad things. To other people, that is. And the Maker, in that way, does not disappoint us. Initially, the Maker was known as Mr. Fantastic. He is the reimagining of Reed Richards if he were to turn to a life of villainy instead, which ends up happening after the Fantastic Four falls apart. Much of his power comes from his genius intellect and his fiercely and horrifically loyal dedication to the pursuit of knowledge and science. The Maker has his own modified symbiote, is virtually immortal, possesses a genius intellect, and still has his stretching powers. And he's done a lot of stuff.